like this. I'll show you a couple different sizes of clamps. This type you got to squeeze together, and that's what I use side dikes for. And you could actually, this style here I don't ever reuse because I don't like these clamps at all. So a lot of times I'll just take and cut these. So you pull those off and pull this one off. Now, here's the interesting part. You actually pull this side off as well when you're doing this. So I like it when these type of straps are reusable, and these are. And I wish you could probably see that from where you are a little bit better, but I take a flat screwdriver, stick it in between here. And again, keep in mind you don't want to rip this boot, it's still in great condition. And if you're wanting to reuse these clamps, keep in mind you don't want to bang them up a whole lot. But they are fairly easy to bend back and forth, so if you do bend them, like I'm doing here, you can bend them back pretty easily. So then these clamps you just lift up on the tab there, and then I just kind of pull them off just like that. Same thing on this side, I'm going to pull it off this way. Now we're able to take that boot and pull it off of the joint here. And I turn it a little bit, make sure that it moves freely, and slide it back. Now this grease is extremely filthy, so this is where I say it's nice to have a bunch of shop towels ready. Next thing I do is grab a pick or a small screwdriver down in here, and I'm going to clean this up so you can see. But there's a clamp in there that keeps this joint from sliding out. You see it'll stop just like that, and I'm going to try to keep that grease in there. So that requires you to take a pick or a screwdriver and find grooves in there. And that groove, and I'll show you where those are, is where the balls actually sit down in. So once you find the groove there, get your pick in behind there or your screwdriver, and I just kind of let it go there. And then you can slide that clip out. Now that clip is free. Now what that allows you to do then is pull this out. So those grooves, that's where that clamp sits, is down in that groove, and the balls sit in these grooves here. And there's probably 2, 4, 6, probably 8 or so of those balls on here, and they will start falling out. You want to make sure you keep those. You want every single one of those, or you're going to be doing this process again. Next thing is a snap ring on this side. And right now the balls just kind of fall out, and that's okay as long as you keep track of all of them. You don't want to wipe them up in your towels and then throw them away, because like I said, you have to have those. Now there's a snap ring on this side, and just 1, 2, 3 towels already. Grab snap ring pliers, and you want to pull out that way. So I'm going to stick it in here. You can find it in amongst all the grease there. Take that snap ring, pull it out. Now you've got the snap ring out. Now what you're going to be able to do is take this, slide this out, and you pull that right off of there. Now keep track which way it goes back together. The cup side, if you were to hold it this way, you can see there, this outer cage sticks out farther this way. That is what's going to go. It's going to go on that direction. So the side that's flush is on this side, facing that way. Side that's cupped goes out. So it sits in there just like that. If you were to buy this joint, it would look like this. It would have the balls, all of them, not what's scattered on the table here. All the balls, this joint that's splined in there, and the snap ring as well. I'm going to set that there so you can keep a lookout for that. Now you can take, and this boot, keep in mind that's still good. We're going to slide that off of there. All the grease kind of stays in there, so I keep that in there as much as possible. So this clamp is off. We've already removed the clamps on this side. Now this one, same thing. This is stock boot, so it's a little more brittle still. This looks like it's aftermarket, more rubber. You could cut this off if you needed to. Hopefully you're not to the point where it's completely off already. That wouldn't be good, but this like I said, this joint is still in great condition. Now we just slide that all the way off like that. You can see how much grease is in there, and they have actually put more grease in there, which is maybe why that joint feels so good. But I don't, if this has a rip boot, I don't reuse this grease. So I clean that all up. Then you can spray it out there with any kind of parts cleaner, but you want to make sure that you've got all the debris out of there. And I take it, sometimes you can clean up with gas, but make sure you put a lot of grease back in there. And then you obviously tip it upside down, otherwise that whatever kind of cleaner is going to stay in there. So once we get it all cleaned up, this joint is good, and it'll just spin around freely. You'll have a kit that looks like this, and I've actually got a different boot that I'm going to use, but it'll have grease, a lot of times 2 pouches of grease, at least 2 clamps, and then the boot. So that's an EPI there. Now we take grease, a pack that looks like this, or any, I mean, you want to use a grease made for these, because like some greases are way too thin. Now what I like to do is hold my axle up, and I just take and shove grease down in there. Now if this wasn't already packed with grease, I would put a layer of grease on there, and then I just take and shove it down like that. But this is already packed with grease. But again, if this was ripped bad and had debris in there, you want to make sure you clean it out good. Therefore, you wouldn't have any more grease in there. So I kind of pack grease on top there. I'm going to take this boot, slide it down, and then slide it over top. There will be a groove that this side of the boot needs to sit on. So find that groove so that everything sits properly like it should. And this all needs to be cleaned up. If it's not cleaned up, you'll think that your boot is ripped sooner than it actually is. Now, I'll show you a couple different style of clamps here while we're doing this. This clamp, and these a lot of times will come with the new boots. You've got a larger one and a smaller one. If you think about it, the larger one goes on the larger side of the boot, the smaller one goes on the smaller side. So pull that all the way down, as tight as you can like that. These tools are cheap. I don't know, I think $15, maybe $20, and they work great. EPI sends a one similar to this, but it's very, very small. I guess it's not similar to this. It's just looks like a little bolt, but it does the same style. This just makes it a whole lot easier. So you shove that through there, put that in a groove that sits right here. So put that in a groove. That's what you're going to twist to tighten this up. All the way. Make sure that you're in the groove on the joint itself. Make sure you're in the groove with your clamp. Pull that tight. Now you take and spin this. Still making sure we're in the right spot there. Spin this. You don't have to really crank on it because you can break these clamps. And then what I do is turn this over, still holding on to this screw, turn that over, and that creases that joint there. And this lever here cuts your. Now I take a little hammer then and tap this down so it's flat, and then you've got 2 tabs on top there. Bend those down, and then I like to just take a hammer and kind of just tap on all this, make sure there is no sharp edges. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing on this side. This is slid up when all that wrestling was going on. We're going to do the same thing on that side. So take this clamp, remember we were going to reuse this one. So slide this on. Now this clamp slides on there, still in this position. Okay, now all you got to do, and this is a really easy style, but take and flip this over, and it'll end up in the same position that it was in. Now I take a pair of side dikes. You can use needle nose pliers. Take those 2 clamps on either side and pinch them. put it down like that. Now I take a hammer still, just to make sure there's no sharp edges, and I'll tap on that. Now that side is done. And I'll do the same thing. Now this side, remember we had to take apart. This joint was all good, nothing major there. Now it's important that you remember this process. If you're reusing these, you need to slide that on now. Next thing would be the boot. And you slide this all the way down so that it's out of your way. Got your clamp here, you need that. That can actually go on at any point because you've got a groove in there. Now remember, this side is cupped and it goes this way. Now we've got your snap ring, and you want to make sure that this is in the groove. If this is not in the groove, you'll know it when you hit your first big bump. And a way to double check, you can take and just pull on that axle or that joint to get it off of there. It will fall off if that snap ring is not all the way in. It'll fall off. So I would suggest double checking it before you get your boot on there. Now what you can do on this side, take the grease, fill it up. You can fill it half full or so. Now we'll put all these balls in. Make sure they're all in there. Now you take, kind of slide your hand at the same time you're sliding it on there. Now what you can do to fill that bearing up with grease is just push it all the way on. Grease will just shoot through that. Now we've got your ring here. And same thing, you'll know it if this doesn't stay in place because your joint will fall apart. Sit in there, and it's about, I would say, 1/8 of an inch into this coupling or this joint here. So just so you can gauge where it's at there. Now, at this point, you'll be able to pull it off of there if that's not in place. So it's in place. Now what I do is put the rest of the grease on there. Spin it around there. Now just take and slide that boot back on. And then we're back to the same place. We can reuse these. We've got this clamp already on there. I'm going to reuse this one here. That one's on. Crimp that down. Now you take your pair of side dikes. Clamp down. Everything's greasy and sliding all over the place. Slide that down as best as possible. Put that one on. Same thing on this side. All right, move that down. Make sure everything's smooth out there. Now clean up our axle really good, because if you don't, it will look like your joints are leaking, looks like your boot's ripped. Now I'm going to show you how to put it back on the four-wheeler.